Hello folks, I'm Filler B and welcome back to Stellaris. This is my quick guide for science ships to help you with little tips and tricks on how to use science ships, what their purpose is, and all the different functions they have in the game. So first off, your science ship is easily identifiable by the little science symbol here, or showing up on the civilian ships on the right side of the outliner here, down at the bottom. Science ships serve three primary purposes in the game. They are survey ships, and they use to explore the galaxy. They also do archaeological digs, archaeological sites that you find, and they give science boosts to your planets when you assign them to i.e. planet. We'll go over each of these in detail in a minute. First, let's talk about surveying, the first one. This is probably the most important one in your system. So if you look at here, we're starting as Earth, the Earth Republic, and this is the very beginning of the game. And your science ship is quite helpful at this time. We use it to explore the galaxy. See all these systems here that are gray? That means these systems have not been surveyed, and our science ship is here to do that job. To do that, you simply grab your science ship, right-click, you can survey the system. Very easy. If you want to queue up systems, you grab your science ship, you hold down the right or any of the shift keys. I'm holding down the left shift key, and then you mark survey for that system, and then you mark survey for the next system, and it'll queue it up. It'll show how many orders there are here. This is based on how many celestial bodies the computer knows are in that system. And I say knows, and I'll get to that in a second. So this is 35 celestial bodies. So what is a celestial body? Those are planets, stars, moons, and asteroids. If you hover over this, you'll see all the ones here. You see the Rodon system has quite a few. And then it'll go down to the next system, and it'll show how long it would take to go through all these, and that's 88 days or something like that. And I say knows because if I queue in this next one here and I do survey, it only adds one more. Because the science ship and your empire doesn't know what's in this system yet. It knows there's a star there, but it doesn't know what it is because this is an unknown system. So you haven't really discovered the system yet, or explored the system yet, is the term in the game. And to explore a system, if you just want to explore it, you can right-click with your science ship and do explore system. That means the science ship will just come in here and pop in, do a little scan, and see what's going on. It will not survey any of the worlds. You will not know any of the details about the thing other than how many planets they have and if there are hostile enemies or friendly enemies or whatnot. Just give you a rough overview of the system. I generally don't use this particular command very often because I kind of useless. I find it better just to explore. So let's talk a little bit about early exploration. If you're starting off in the beginning of the game, you need to decide how quickly you'd like to explore and in what direction. So what do I mean by that? So how quickly you want to explore should be determined by how many science ships you want to have, and you should really determine that on where you are in the system. So zoom out, take a little bit, see how many directions you need to go, how many outlets there are for your empire. Based on this Earth playthrough, it looks like I have one main one, which splits off probably in two ways over here. So I probably want at least two science ships heading in this direction, and it might go this way. These two might connect, I'm not sure. We can't quite tell. Although I can see pretty far out this way, and so I'm wondering if this doesn't connect at all. We'll see, but just in case, let's say 3 science ships. But the one thing you need to note about science ships is that they have a cost. So the base cost of a science ship is 100 if you were to build it in your shipyards, and 60 days worth of time. That's not a particularly high cost. It's a little hard at the beginning of the game. It's going to take you 10 months to build up 100 just from my start here, but that's not the main cost. The main cost is to Unity. So each leader is going to cost you a certain amount of money to get, and each leader has a certain level of upkeep. Right now we already have -10 for leader upkeep because each leader costs you Unity to have. So every science ship needs a scientist, and every scientist is going to have ongoing Unity upkeep, which is going to slow down your access to your traditions, which are very powerful. So you need to decide how quickly you want to get your traditions versus how fast you want to explore. I lean a little on the explore side because I think that's important early game, and you can always build up to get more tradition later on, but some people prefer getting those traditions right away. It depends what kind of playthrough you're doing and what your goals are. And just remember that when you hire a new leader, so you can see how many scientists we have already, it's going to cost you 100, and then every leader after that's going to cost you a little bit more. I think it's 125 maybe, or maybe 150 the next one, and then 200, and it keeps going up and up and up. So be aware of that. In the early game, you're going to be choked for a little bit of Unity, and you need to really decide how quickly you want to get traditions versus science ships. Now the direction you want to explore is the other thing I want to mention. You want to explore manually. There are two ways that science ships explore, manual and automatic. So the manual is what I showed you before. You just right click on a planet and say explore. I've already explored Bernard Star here, but we don't go over here. I can survey the system and explore, hold down shift, survey that system, and then survey over here. And this is a good path to go, because what we're doing is we're exploring the choke points on the map so we can claim as much territory as possible at the early point of the game. I want to know where to claim space quickly so that I can section off a portion of this galaxy for my empire. And I can tell that going over and surveying this system, and this system is not going to give me any advantage, or even the Rodon system, in claiming more space later on. Like, what do you call it? Fencing off the AI and the AI empires from gaining more space. It's possible that we should go this way as well, and maybe I will with my second science ship. But to start with, definitely this way, because I can see there's a big section over here. So I want to make sure that I can at least build up to here, because this looks like a choke point. If you look in, there's one in, and this goes out to 3. And there's probably another choke point on this side as well. So that's something you need to do very early on. The next thing your science ship does while out in space is anomalies. So these are little things that show up when you go into a system. And it asks you if you want to do it for now, if you want to change the scientist, which you don't really need to do, but you could, or you want to research it. Often in the beginning of the game, I leave all these for now. And I'll tell you why. It's because the time it takes to research this is based on the difficulty level and your skill of your scientist. So a level 1 scientist here is not very good at researching these anomalies. They'll get that done, but it'll take them time. And this challenging one is going to cost 300 time to do. And we're only doing it at 1 a day, which is 300 days for the scientist to get through. That's a long time to take your scientist out of commission doing this particular anomaly. Even if the rewards are good, that means that scientist is not exploring, not surveying systems, and not getting it to you can claim the new systems to expand your empire. So I always leave these at the beginning of the game, and you can just come back later. You just go leave for now, and what happens is that it shows up on the map right here. So you can see we've got a level 3 anomaly sitting in this system that needs to be done. You can come back to it. You don't even need to have the system claim to be able to do this. It's wonderful that way. But I often leave these at the beginning of the game and come back later when my ships have less to explore and have more time to come back and do it, and also when they're a higher level. And also, let's talk about stances, the last part of surveying that I think is quite important. So science ships have 2 stances. All ships have multiple stances. Science ships have 2. They have passive and they have evasive. They start off at evasive, and that evasive means that they'll go around the galaxy, either on your pre-generated path here that you've made by selecting here, or the automatic path if you have automatic surveying like I did here. And if they run into any enemies, or they see enemy enemies based on their sensors, so if they happen to move over to this system and they see an enemy over here because their sensors allow them to peek into the next system, then they will not go there. They will avoid that system. And they'll run away from any enemies they do encounter by jumping into a system in case it's blind. Blind jump into that system somehow. And this is pretty good for keeping your scientists alive, especially if you have them on the automatic surveying. Because if you don't have this set up and you go to passive, they will ignore all enemies. They'll see them, but they'll ignore them. So if there's an enemy sitting next to this planet, they go into the Cirrus system here, and there's an enemy floating around this planet minding its own business, but it's hostile, they'll happily survey along and get close to this enemy, and the enemy will come over and blow them up. So you have to be careful about it. But why would you want to use this passive stance? Well, that's a good question. I often use it to move past enemies that are blocking my exploration. So let's say there was an enemy in this system. Let's say that enemy was hovering around this planet right here for some reason, around Barren Star 4 here. So what we can do is we can take our science ship and say, hey, I don't want to engage this, but if I have it on the evasive stance, they won't be able to come into the system. Otherwise, and they will try to avoid the enemy. But if you change it around to passive, they'll go into the system, and you can manually tell them to like move over here and hold down that shift key again. They get multiple commands, have them move around the outside of the system so they don't aggro the enemy here that's sitting passively, and they can go off to the next system and survey and be out of the way, which I think is a very helpful way to get past these enemies that sometimes block off choke points, and you can continue on to explore as you go. The next function of science ships is archaeology. So this is a pretty straightforward function. You run across these archaeological sites throughout the galaxy as you're going along. These can be created by events, these can be created by digging up stuff, well, scientific like research points or whatever, projects that you can do. Can also happen from your origin, and sometimes you just run across them. And they show up in your systems like these little dig symbol here, and your science ships are the ones who dig them up. So all you do is just go on your planet and you hit excavate site and they will go there. And you see the little symbol here change to an excavation thing, then they'll go over there. And the way that works is, first off, it has to be inside your space to do. So if this archaeological site was over here, or even in Bernard Star, so a system that is unsurveyed, or even a system that is surveyed, I cannot dig it up until it's inside my space. So I got to make sure that happens. But once it's in your space, your science ship will head over to it and they'll hover above the space, digging up the site. And you'll get a series of story events where the scientists, based on your science skill, they'll come up at a certain frequency because there's sort of a random dice roll going on in the background to move on the archaeological dig, and you go through a series of stories events. And each of these events will probably give you a little bit of a bonus here or there, and probably some minor artifacts. Till eventually the story concludes of the event and you'll get the final resolution, whatever that is. And often these events have different endings. A handful of endings they can do based on maybe the skill of your scientist or just sort of random chance. But you can end up with some more minor artifact, you can end up with some resources, or you can even end up with some science, and if you're lucky, you'll end up with an artifact, which can be very fun to get. This is a good way to get artifacts, is through these archaeological sites. But much like Anomalies, I suggest that you ignore these at the beginning of the game. You build out your empire as much as you can, and when your science ships have less to do and they're a higher skill, and particularly if you have a scientist with the archaeological trait, which will show up down here, then you come back and do these digs when you want to. The last thing that we need to talk about is the science boost. So that's the other main function of science ships. So we go over to the Sol system here, take your science ship, and you just head over to any planet that you have with a colony on it, and you go assist research. And the science ship will head over and will give research to that planet. And what it gives the planet is 2% science output per level of the scientist. So if a scientist level 1 will only give 2, but a scientist level 5 will give 10. And this is quite helpful. So if your world produces around 500 science, let's say, because you have a nice research world, you get a 10% boost to that, that's an extra 50 science. That's pretty good on your whole thing. But I would again wait till later in the game to do this. This is a good way to use up science ships that don't have any more exploration to do. There are no more archaeological sites, or they're not a good archaeological site digger, and or there's not much anomalies to do. They can set these up on your research planets to give you a nice little bonus and give them something to do later in the game instead of just disbanding them. The last thing I want to talk about is a few odds and ends. And we'll just go through them real quickly here. So first off, science ships scan debris. So when you have debris, as you can see, the debris in this playthrough, now that I've popped over to this one. So you get debris after battles. So this is usually if there's a technological difference between you and the empire you're facing. This can be a big difference or even a small difference. You'll get some debris to analyze, and your science ships do that. So all you do is right click on this and on the system, and you just go research projects in the system, just as if you're researching a project that comes up from an anomaly or an event. And then once you're done the scan, they'll do some sort of debris analyze thing. So for this one, they get raw physics and engineering research points, because the empire difference between me and the empire I'm fighting in this playthrough is not particularly great. But you can get stuff like progress towards tech. So if we go to situation log, you can see there's a chance I can get some progress towards small crystal infused plating, or there's a chance I can get progress to subspace sensors based off of these particular debris sites. And that can really help you move forward, especially as an aggressive empire in the science tree, to catch up on tech, or to get techs that maybe you've been ignoring because you're beelining something else. And it usually is only for ship tech stuff, not just any old tech. Another thing that's important to note is that ships automatically upgrade. So we just take a look at our science ship here. you can see that this science ship already has high level stuff. So they have 2nd level armor, 4th level shields, 3rd level engines, 3rd level hyperlanes, some thrusters and sensors as well that are of a higher level. So when the ship starts out, these are all 1s, but as you research stuff, they automatically get upgraded out in the field. You don't need to take them back to space stations to get done, which can be very helpful. I also want to note that trap ships, so these are ships that get caught behind a closed border situation. So if I had a ship, let's say, was exploring and it went out here and it ended up in a system, like say this system here, that's sort of empty, but surrounded by an empire, and that empire closes its borders to me, that ship will no longer be able to move. It can still survey the system. When it's done, it's stuck. And if it's stuck on automatic surveying, it will pop up with a message saying, I cannot do anything more. What do you want me to do? And if you click this little return button, like this, it will go back to your home space. It'll disappear into this list as a lost ship. And then after a period of time, it will show up somewhere in your empire, and you'll be able to recover that ship and use it for wherever you want. And the last thing that I think is important to talk about with science ships is training up scientists. So scientists in most empires are mortal. In this playthrough, I happen to be immortal as a robot race. But these scientists here in most races grow old and die eventually. And that's the case, you'll want to put new scientists in. And this is a particularly strong focus area for scientists. You want high-level scientists with good skills in these things so you can get research done faster. In fact, it's much more important to have that than have high-level scientists in your science ships who do sort of menial tasks and tasks that are only semi-important. Having a faster anomaly research rate is nice, but not necessary for your campaign success. Same thing for archaeological digs, same thing for survey speed. But having your tech come faster will make or break a playthrough. So if one of these leaders in your technology tree dies for whatever reason, and you have a good level scientist, let's say this guy here, who's level 6, you may want to put them into that slot and then go and hire a different leader on your own, who will all start at level 1 anyhow. Even though this leader is particularly good, I'd probably hire them, but a level 6 scientist on this ship, so this leader gives plus 15 research speed, plus the 2 from here, so it's plus 17 research speed. But this level 6 one here, if you hover over their little symbol, you can see the research speed is plus 12. So if they pop over into the queue, that'll already give them a plus 12. It's a good way to train up scientists that you can use to replace scientists that die off in your tree. Definitely a stopgap for a loss of tech there until another scientist gets trained up. So that's the end of my little tour of the civilian ships, and specifically the science ship. Stay tuned for more of these, especially on the construction ships, colony ships, and so forth, and other tutorials on my channel. Be sure to check them out, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.